On Sunday, May 12, 2013, at 6:45 p.m., a distressed young woman ran into the central police station of Clermont-Ferrand, France. It was 25-year-old Cécile Bourgeon. Barely able to catch her breath, she explained that she had been relaxing in Montjuzet Park with her two daughters, 3-year-old Eva and 5-year-old Fiona. While the girls were playing, Cécile had lain down on the grass and drifted off to sleep. She said she had only dozed for 20 to 30 minutes, but when she woke up, she discovered that her older daughter, Fiona, was missing. Cécile spent about an hour searching for her daughter on her own. She even called her boyfriend, Berkan Maclouf, to check if Fiona had somehow made it home alone. But Fiona was neither at home nor in the park. That's when Cécile rushed to the police to report her daughter's disappearance. Cécile explained that her daughter was just over 5 years old. Fiona lived with her mother's boyfriend, Berkan Maclouf, and her younger sister, Eva. Cécile and Berkan had been together for several months, and Cécile was expecting a child from him. She described Fiona as a very smart and quick-witted child for her age. The little girl wasn't afraid of people at all, so if someone spoke to her, she might have followed them. That was exactly what terrified her mother the most, that a stranger might have lured Fiona away. Police officers, firefighters, and even the army rushed to search Montjuzet Park, which covered an area of 26 hectares. They were assisted by tracking dogs and 2 helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras. However, night fell very quickly, and the search had to be called off. It resumed the following day. At the same time, the police held a briefing for the press and announced the phone number of a hotline for anyone who might have seen the girl. In the following days, the hotline received over 500 calls, all of which were carefully checked by the police. But at that moment, the main lead came from Cécile, who hinted that the father of Fiona and Eva, named Nicolas Chafoulet, might be involved in the kidnapping. Allegedly, he could have taken advantage of the mother's inattentiveness and taken the girl to his place. The police went to Nicolas's home. The man allowed them to search his house. The girls were not there. In fact, he only heard from the officers for the first time that his daughter was missing. He explained that he hadn't seen the girl for a long time because the mother was preventing their meetings. Nicolas said that he and Cécile met at school when he was 17 and she was 15. Soon the couple had their first daughter, Fiona, followed by her younger sister, Eva. The man explained that at first Cécile didn't mind their meetings with Fiona, but then she started to create obstacles, and some time ago even went to court demanding to restrict his visitation rights. Nicolas also described what he was doing on Sunday. The police checked his schedule, questioned relatives and acquaintances, and quickly confirmed that he was not in the park at the time Fiona disappeared. It quickly became clear that the child was not in the park, and the police moved on to the next phase of the investigation. Officers reviewed all surveillance camera footage from the streets and buses to see if anyone had spotted the child with a stranger. Investigators also interviewed more than 260 people who had previously been convicted of sexual offenses. Since Fiona was a very sweet girl with beautiful gray-green eyes, the police feared that she might have attracted the attention of a predator. Overall, the police did everything possible not to miss a single lead. The sheer volume of work and thoroughness with which they approached the investigation was impressive. At the same time, Cécile decided to appeal to the public. Dressed all in black, she spoke before journalists. The young woman looked shaken, yet heartfelt as she pleaded for the return of her little daughter. Without a doubt, all of France sympathized with the mother. It felt natural to empathize and show solidarity with Cécile. Of course, being a mother of 2 young daughters and expecting a child herself, she was very tired. She allowed herself to rest for just half an hour, during which time her child disappeared. This is the worst nightmare any mother could imagine, and everyone prayed for Fiona to be found as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the police focused on witnesses who were in Montjuzet Park that Sunday evening. There were more than 30 such witnesses. The officers hoped that some of them might have seen or crossed paths with Cécile and her children. Indeed, a few people claimed to have seen her. The rest were less certain. Maybe they saw her, maybe they didn't. Maybe it wasn't even her. In any case, there were no solid facts to confirm with 100% certainty that Fiona was actually in the park on the evening of May 12th. Why couldn't the police simply take the claims of a mother driven nearly mad by worry at face value? Because from the very start of the investigation, there were small details that troubled the investigators. For example, when Cécile arrived at the station, she was dressed in white clothes, specifically white pants. Yet she claimed she had been sleeping on the grass for almost half an hour. Okay, let's suppose that's true. But what were her daughters doing during that time, considering that there were no slides or any playground equipment near the spot where she said she slept? These were the first warning signs that made the police realize they couldn't take any testimony for granted and needed to verify everything thoroughly. Detectives decided to investigate Fiona's life before her disappearance. Surprisingly, they found out that since the beginning of the school year, Fiona had missed 42 days of kindergarten. The teacher said that in the last few weeks, Fiona was rarely seen. She barely showed up throughout April and almost the entire week before she vanished. The last time she was at kindergarten was on May 7th. One of the teachers noticed that Fiona looked pale. In fact, she used the word ghastly. Fiona was very thin, too thin for a girl her age. It seemed she was poorly fed, undernourished, and sleeping very little. However, the teacher did not notice any signs of abuse. Whatever the case, Fiona never returned to kindergarten. However, on May 8, 2013, the very next day, a surveillance camera caught Fiona with her mother, Berkan, and her little sister at a movie theater in a shopping mall. Fiona wore a headband that the police suspected was covering a bruise. They spoke with an employee of the cinema who had seen the family arrive. The woman was struck by the sight of the little girl who lagged behind her parents and sister. The witness said Fiona's face looked distorted around the temple area, appearing to have a large bruise, hematoma. She was so shocked she compared Fiona to a zombie and called her a walking corpse because of her grayish complexion. According to the witness, Fiona showed every sign of a child who was not well. The woman immediately thought Fiona was being mistreated. This was the last time Fiona was seen on camera with her family, and it gave the impression that she was suffering. It is worth noting that social services had never received any complaints or reports about Fiona. At that time, there was no evidence that she was a beaten or abused child. The detectives spoke again with Fiona's father, Nicholas, and asked if he had noticed anything unusual in his daughter's behavior or stories. Nicholas recounted an incident that had happened 6 months earlier. Fiona and Eva were at his house. While Fiona was taking a bath, she told her father, "Dad, Berkan hurt me." Naturally, Nicholas believed his daughter and arranged to meet with Berkan to demand an explanation. The meeting went as expected, heated and confrontational, and as Nikolai was leaving, he was so angry that he kicked a post to let off steam. He ended up breaking his leg. That was the last time Nicholas saw his daughter, because from that moment on, Cécile did everything she could to prevent their contact. She even went to a judge and requested that Nicholas be denied visitation rights. At the same time, Berkan began demanding that Fiona call him Dad. The police discovered that Berkan had several convictions for threats, violence, and theft. He himself had never known a better life because he suffered severe abuse and humiliation from his father and older brother. His mother couldn't protect him. She died of illness. Berkan grew up in a family where nobody cared about him. He had no one to hold on to, and he never had a family. Therefore, the arrival of Cécile and her daughters in his life was like a gift to him. Unfortunately, he couldn't appreciate this gift properly. People who knew him described him as someone capable of unjustified violence. He could lose his temper at any moment. His attitude toward the children became simply unbearable. The situation was made worse by the fact that both Cécile and Berkan were addicted to illegal substances, including some of the most dangerous ones. The couple showed no concern for the children living in this unhealthy environment, while Cécile and Berkan carelessly used drugs. The police quickly developed a feeling that the couple was hiding the truth from them. Unfortunately, this was just an intuition. There was no concrete evidence. But finally, here and there, clues began to emerge, suggesting that the couple was, at the very least, withholding information. The couple's neighbors told the police that they had seen Cécile's car on Sunday, May 12th at 5:45 p.m., parked near the house. This was strange, because if the car really was there at 5:45 p.m., then Cécile would have arrived at the park almost at 6 p.m. She would have barely had enough time to walk with the children to the spot where they were resting, and practically no time to sleep there. At some point, the detectives began to wonder whether the couple was manipulating them and had invented the entire scenario from start to finish. Meanwhile, while the detectives were searching for confirmation of their theory, quite strange and contradictory things were happening. A month after Fiona's disappearance, Cécile, smiling, shared some news with journalists that genuinely touched them. She told how she had changed the bed linen on Fiona's bed in her room and arranged her stuffed teddy bears. She did this so that when the girl returned, she would see the room in that state and know that her return was awaited and prepared for. Cécile admitted that such actions gave her a little hope, and it was very touching. Then in July, the couple decided to move together with little Eva to Perpignan, where Cécile's mother and stepfather lived. It was 600 kilometers from the city of Clermont-Ferrand. The police were baffled. How could they leave the city where their missing daughter had been searched for 2 months? It was beyond comprehension. But that wasn't all. When moving, the couple didn't take Fiona's belongings with them, and they rented an apartment that was too small for 4 people. That is, even if Fiona was found, there would be no place for her in the new apartment. It created the impression that Cécile and Berkan had decided to start a new life without her. The detectives examined Cécile's computer, and despite the fact that she had cleaned it, found some very interesting search queries. They found a news report about the search for 2 children who had gone missing from a park in Marseille. The news report was exactly the same as Cécile's own statement when she went to the police station after her daughter disappeared. In Marseille, the mother stated that she had come to the park with her 2 children, that she had fallen asleep for 20-25 minutes, and when she woke up, they were no longer there. This was exactly what Cécile had said. And if before the police had assumed that the girl had not disappeared from the park and that the family was hiding something, now they were convinced of it. Because Cécile had searched for this news before she reported Fiona's disappearance, it seemed as if Cécile was preparing a cover story to explain the baby's disappearance. Moreover, a doctor contacted the police, one whom Cécile and Berkan had approached. They had asked the doctor to provide a medical certificate to justify Cécile's absence from kindergarten for 21 days, but they did not bring the girl with them. The doctor agreed. On May 10th, he issued a certificate for Fiona. Interestingly, the girl had often missed kindergarten before, but the couple had never presented a medical certificate. So Cécile and Berkan's desire to obtain the certificate seemed particularly curious. Thus, the evidence against the couple was piling up like a snowball, but the police were in no hurry to arrest them. The thing was, Cécile was pregnant. If she were arrested, her detention in police custody would very quickly be canceled for medical reasons. In other words, she would be released before the police could interrogate her, which would mean losing the element of surprise. That's why the detectives were simply waiting. In August, Cécile gave birth to a baby boy. At the beginning of September, she contacted a journalist covering the case of her daughter's disappearance and complained that the police seemed to have sidelined her, weren't sharing any news with her, and that she was very unhappy about this. But in reality, the detectives were not sharing updates with Cécile because during the investigation, they had zeroed in on Cécile herself. On September 24th, the police arrested the couple. They were immediately separated to prevent them from coming up with a story to tell the detectives. The couple's behavior was drastically different. Berkan acted defiantly and aggressively, refusing to talk to the police or sign the document about his detention. He was practically forced into the police station and tried to resist arrest. Unlike her boyfriend, Cécile was very compliant. At the station, the detectives noticed that Cécile was covered in bruises. She reluctantly admitted that Berkan had been physically abusive towards her. The police focused all their efforts on her because they could not expect any cooperation from Berkan. Nevertheless, despite her outward softness and compliance, Cécile remained silent for a long time and insisted that her daughter had disappeared in the park. She did not waver from her testimony, despite the blatant implausibility of this version. It was only during the 4th interrogation that she decided to confess everything. Fiona had been dead for a long time. Cécile assured that she had cared for her daughter. However, judging by her words, in the days leading up to Fiona's death, she and her boyfriend were only thinking about where to get drugs. The situation reached its peak on the evening of May 11th. Fiona was agitated, didn't want to sleep, and was probably being fussy like many children her age. Only Berkan was in the room with her. Then Cécile heard a slap, and then another. Fiona was screaming and crying. Cécile entered the girl's bedroom to push the man away from the child and saw a bruise near Fiona's eye, which began to swell quickly. Cécile explained that she treated Fiona with arnica and put her to bed. The next morning, Berkan woke her up, saying Fiona's skin was cold. The couple realized the girl was dead. Berkan convinced Cécile not to call the police. He took the child in his arms, carried her to the bathroom, washed and dried her, then placed her in a large sports bag. He left a chain with a small medallion on the girl. Then the couple put the bag on the back seat of the car. They didn't know where to go until they reached the shore of Lake Ada, where they parked the car. 3-year-old Ava was with them all this time, sitting in her car seat on the back seat next to her older sister's body in the sports bag. The couple was lucky because near an abandoned cabin they found a shovel. Cécile and Berkan dug a shallow grave. They took Fiona out of the bag and placed her in the hole. But when trying to fill the grave, Berkan broke the shovel handle and had to finish with only half a shovel. Then they drove back. Upon returning to the apartment, they came up with what to tell the police. According to Cécile, Berkan came up with the story about Fiona's disappearance in the park. What happened next, the police already knew. After the confession, Cécile seemed sincere, and relief was noticeable. The detectives were convinced that at least part of her story was true. They had received what they feared, but had no doubt about the confirmation of Fiona's death. It was time to talk to Berkan. He continued to behave aggressively, protesting his arrest. When the police told him that Cécile had confessed, he didn't believe it. But when the detectives mentioned the broken shovel, he realized that only Cécile could have told them about it. Berkan admitted that he had spanked Fiona, but denied beating her. He added that on the night from Saturday to Sunday, he found Fiona vomiting. He put her back to bed, and in the morning discovered her cold, lifeless body in her room. When recounting that terrible night, Berkan was cold. It was almost unbearable to listen to. It was time to find Fiona's body. The police concluded that it would be easiest to take Cécile to the forest so she could show where they had dug the grave. The detectives boarded a police plane that picked Cécile up from the runway at Perpignan Airport. Under police escort, the young woman was brought to the area around Lake Adat. She tried to find the place where she and Berkan had dug a grave for Fiona, but couldn't locate it. It seemed she was genuinely trying to help. Moreover, her lawyer advised her to cooperate in finding the body because it would benefit her during the trial. But she kept pointing one way, then another. Perhaps she was just an excellent actress. When asked if she and her boyfriend had left any markers, she said no. Her intention had been never to return and to keep moving forward. Attempts to find Fiona were made several times, but were unsuccessful. The detectives wondered if she was deceiving them again. Could a mother really not remember under what circumstances her daughter was buried? Such a traumatic event couldn't be forgotten. But psychiatric experts explained that it was possible, especially considering Cécile's drug use. When the couple was brought back from Perpignan to Clermont-Ferrand, a crowd of several hundred screaming, frenzied people was waiting for them. They shook the cars, demanding Cécile be handed over to them for punishment. People who had passionately searched for Fiona realized Cécile had deceived them and wanted her to answer for what she had done. Charges were filed against the couple. Since Cécile did not strike Fiona, she was charged with offenses punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Berkan was charged with a crime that could send him to prison for 30 years. Both were taken into custody pending trial. The police suspected that perhaps the couple didn't want the body to be found because it could reveal something even more terrible that had been done to Fiona. For example, an autopsy might determine the severity of the beatings Fiona suffered in her final days. Or maybe they simply couldn't tell the truth. The fact was, on the evening of May 12th at 5:30 p.m., when Cécile supposedly went to the park, a neighbor saw Berkan throw a bag into the trash bin. The man was very surprised. He said, "Berkan never takes out the trash, but that day he was carrying a large trash bag." Because of this, the investigators suspected that the couple simply threw the body into the dumpster without any precautions. Could the couple tell the public, who was already demanding they be lynched, that they had dumped Fiona in the garbage? Of course not. They would never have been able to explain that. Next, as often happens in cases like this, the accused began blaming each other. Cécile claimed that Berkan had not been the first to raise his hand against Fiona, and that she often had to apply makeup to the girl to hide bruises. In turn, during a second interrogation, Berkan stated that Cécile also inflicted beatings on their daughter, and that she was the one responsible for Fiona's death. Since the body was not found, the police and the investigating judge did not know whom to believe. Yes, Berkan changed his testimony, but did he do it to reveal the truth about Cécile or to exonerate himself? After his statement, she was charged with the same offense as Berkan, intentionally causing grievous bodily harm under aggravating circumstances, which unintentionally resulted in the victim's death. Cécile, of course, denied beating her daughter. She admitted that she failed in her role as a mother and could not protect her daughter, but she did not beat her. When the trial began in November 2016, everyone hoped the defendants would speak up and reveal the location of Fiona's body. The courtroom was overcrowded, and people demanded the harshest punishment for Cécile. The audience exuded hostility toward her. By that time, Cécile was 29 years old. Berkan was 35. Berkan had become much calmer. His gaze was distant, yet he seemed to be the only one showing feelings and emotions about the trial. Cécile, on the contrary, was cold and withdrawn. Their defense strategy was that they were innocent and had done nothing wrong. Fiona's death was the result of an unfortunate accident. The prosecutor, for his part, demanded the maximum punishment for both, 30 years imprisonment for the crime they were accused of. However, the jury did not agree. Cécile was not found guilty of beating her daughter. Her guilt was recognized only in failing to provide assistance to a person in danger, filing a false crime report, and tampering with the crime scene. She was sentenced to 5 years and Berkan to 20 years in prison. Obviously, this decision was unexpected and caused a storm of outrage from the public who harbored hatred towards Cécile. That's why, when the verdict was delivered, the first thought that came to mind was not punishment for Cécile, who not only concealed the murder of her daughter, helped hide the body, but also tried to accuse an innocent man, Nicolas Chauffourier, of her kidnapping. Berkan also disagreed with the verdict. He considered it unbearable to be called a child murderer, even more unbearable than the fact of prison imprisonment itself. He filed an appeal, and the Court of Cassation overturned the sentence. Cécile, having served her 5-year sentence, was released pending a new trial. During the 1.5 years she spent free, she got married and had another child. According to a psychiatrist, this was her way of filling the void, as if it were the only freedom left to her, the freedom to have children. In December 2020, a new trial took place. Cécile behaved as if it didn't concern her at all. She gave evasive answers and even no longer knew how old Fiona would be now. Overall, she seemed to distance herself from what was happening, showing indifference and naturally irritating the jurors. She defended herself much worse, as if she believed she would simply leave the courtroom a free person, just as she had entered. As before, both defendants were tried for intentional infliction of grievous bodily harm under aggravating circumstances, resulting in the victim's death by negligence. They faced up to 30 years in prison. As a result, Cécile was sentenced to 20 years in prison and Berkan to 18 years. According to those present in the courtroom, the decision was quite symbolic. The 2-year difference was not significant, but it served as an important message, indicating the predominant role of Cécile in Fiona's death. Years passed, the body was never found, so what happened to Fiona remains unknown for sure. The truth is only partially known. Cécile and Berkan keep their secret, much to the despair of Fiona's father. According to the mother, it is only known that the day before her death, Fiona suffered from nausea and abdominal pain. The forensic expert testifying at the trial leaned toward the hypothesis that death resulted from abdominal trauma, the second most common cause of death in cases of severe abuse of minors. As a result of the trial, Cécile lost parental rights. Berkan Maclouf retained his parental rights to Bilal, a boy born to Cécile in 2013. Bilal lives in a foster family. Eva, Fiona's younger sister, lives with her father Nicolas Chauffourier.